Are you a business owner and you're like, man, I need that freedom now. I need to be able to figure out how I can get myself out of that rat race? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hello, my fellow Ripplers. This is Chris Miles, your cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. This show is for you. You work so freaking hard for that money, and you're now ready for that money to start working harder for you today. You want that freedom to become work optional, where you have enough passive income to work because you want to, not because you have to. And of course, it's not just about getting rich, as we talk about in the show. It's about living a rich life because as you're prospering, as you grow financially, as you're at blessed, you have the ability to bless the lives of those around you and create a ripple effect through their lives. Thank you so much for being a part of this show today and allowing me to create that ripple effect through you. I appreciate you guys have been binging and sharing. And man, some of you guys have been followers of the episode since the beginning for 11 plus years. So thank you so much for being a part of our journey and being a part of this today. If you haven't done so already, if you want to follow us on social media, you can follow us anywhere. It's pretty much Money Ripples. It could be at Money Ripples or anywhere else on any type of platform, but be sure to follow us to keep getting that further education that you want today. All right, guys. So I'm bringing on today a special guest, George Bryant. Now, guys, George was introduced to me, and everybody said, you got to meet this guy. He's a stud. He's awesome. Not just because he's a veteran, man. He's battled everything from being in combat to dealing with financial struggles and personal PTSD and everything else, plus becoming a successful seven-figure entrepreneur, right? Someone who's actually been able to go through the grind, be able to overcome. And that's really about his story today. And that's what I want to talk about with you is, again, what can you glean from his journey and how can you apply it in your life so that you can actually have that next level of freedom that you're seeking after as well. So, George, welcome to our show.
Brother, I'm honored to be here and congrats on 11 years, man. That's an undertaking. So I'm stoked to be here.
I know. I just told somebody today, I was like, dude, I'm like, what do you guys, what do you call me now? Like, I'm not even a veteran. I'm really like an OG, I think, in this space, right?
I'd say in podcasting, you're an OG, man. I think anything prior to like 2015, 2016, like you were in early. So I love that.
I know. And that didn't include, I started in 2008 too with a previous podcast, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, I'd
I
say
know.
I'd say veteran. I'd say like founder potentially.
Yeah, I know. It's like, yeah, I remember podcasts. It was hardly a thing back then, but now it is. Well, cool, man. Well, enough about the podcast. Let's talk about you and your story, man. Like, tell us more about that because it's pretty intriguing. I mean, you've been through a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll give everybody the short version because I have an entire podcast that, tells my story. But I never set out to be an entrepreneur. I always joke that I accidentally became an entrepreneur because I kind of like grew up homeless at like 13. I was on my own, joined the Marine Corps, spent 13 years of my life in the Marine Corps, two combat tours, and I got some horrific injuries. So right around like year 13, they're like, "Hey, we're done with you. We're gonna medically separate you." And I didn't really have a backup plan, but I was on this like personal health journey and freedom journey to keep it congruent to the story. And I'd struggle with addiction and bulimia and eating disorders. And so naturally, I went from Marine to food blogger. And becoming a food blogger, I didn't even know that was the thing. I just did it to have accountability and post things on the internet and heal. But eventually it turned into a business. And so that business, ended up writing a book, became a 22-week New York Times bestseller, launched number one app. But ended up losing myself in the process. Like I had, a million plus followers, but I had no sense of identity or freedom, which is the
Mm.
thing that we're talking about today. And so my life was basically driven by everybody else's view of me or optics of me. And so I went through another kind of come to Jesus moment as I'm very loud about, and I walked away from it all. Actually gave the company away as a Christmas present and kind of disappeared off the internet for 3 years. And I didn't even realize that in the process, I'd built this incredible skill set for messaging and marketing and really like self-sovereignty of like being able to become the person to have the business that I desired. And so then I became a consultant. I helped scale a couple companies to a billion, a couple hundred to, seven, eight, nine figures, which is what I still do now. But in that process, I went through what I feel like 25 different versions of myself to land where I am now, which is like the happiest, most peaceful I've ever been. And when I feel like living in like true freedom. So that's like the shortest version I can give.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty big. I know there's a lot of stuff in the middle there to that, the work you
Yeah.
had to do to get there. I mean, for you, I mean, especially, and I can relate to this as well because I remember there was a time probably about 10 plus years ago that I literally was dreaming about putting on a show, right? And I didn't realize I was just a monkey doing the dance, you know, just trying
Yes.
to like be the person I felt. I don't think it's even who they wanted me to be. It's just who they thought I was. And so I kind of
Yeah.
became that person. But I realized I was totally unhappy doing that. You know, what kind of work did you have to do to really become aware, not just aware that there was a problem, but even be able to overcome and find your true self?
Yeah, God, that's such a good question. And, one of the things that I say a lot is that what we tolerate, we eventually embrace. And it
Mm,
speaks directly to kind of your question and your point. And the first step was really, building a sense of self-identity because I was just like you. It was like who they thought I would be and like the status and the cars and the trips and the keynotes and all these different things. It was
hmm
like I weighed my intrinsic value on the external results instead of ever having any semblance of like who I was. And so, the short version is I really had to do some self-discovery. And one of the things I say on my podcast and to my clients is that like you don't, and this is an Alex Sharfin quote, you don't have the business or the life you want because you haven't become the person to run it. And I think all too often we fall into this trap of like, well, I'll just go do more. I'll just go accomplish more things.
mm,
But really, it always leaves that same empty feeling because if you don't have eyes open and eyes closed freedom, eyes open being, financial freedom, business freedom, life freedom, house freedom, but eyes closed freedom, meaning like you can walk away from your phone for a couple of days. You can close your eyes at night and just have peace and gratitude for what you've accomplished, not thinking there's always more.
mm,
It just becomes this like rat race of like, basically burnout reaction, burnout reaction. And so it really is a deep self-discovery practice. And I figured out that one of the biggest things that was missing is I had no sense of values. I didn't know like what I craved or like what was
mm,
really important to me, which, I live in Montana now. And the number one thing that's important to me, and you know this with so many kids, is like time with my son.
mm,
And I would convince myself for years as an entrepreneur, I'm like all the trips and the 140 flights a year. I'm like, I'm doing this for my son. I'm doing this for my son. But if I asked my son where he wanted me, he didn't say on an airplane or in a hotel room. He just wanted me to be with him. And so I had to really identify and lean into like what I valued. And then instead of building a business to sacrifice my life, I built my life and then I built a business to support my life, like my schedule, my time, my clients, the way I want to work, the way that I do business around the priorities of what I valued. And so it's a really deep process of first, number one, finding your values and what that dream is. But number two, working tirelessly not to create them, but more so to protect them. Because I
mm,
find to what I said earlier, it's not that we don't know sometimes, it's that we know, but yet we operate out of integrity with what we know. And we'll be like, oh, I'll
mm,
just do it this one time. Well, eventually that one time turns into multiple times. And then eventually it becomes this thing that we just do. And we forget that when we have these visions, when we have these values, the only power in them is how well we enforce those boundaries. And that was probably the deepest level of work was being willing to not go to a conference or not keynote or not take that business deal, not because it wasn't great on paper, not because the people weren't great, but because it didn't resonate with me and my values and started protecting my values over all the external things.
right. That's so important. I mean, and I've seen that in so many cases lives that people will talk about those values and sometimes they'll even live accordingly, but then they'll do things completely contradicted, right?
Yeah.
And that's just
Yeah.
not happiness.
Yeah, and truthfully, I just to add to that, like what it ends up looking like in real life for entrepreneurs, for investors, for anything is like you end up achieving this thing on paper that you thought was important, but when you're not really clear on your values, it eventually erodes away and it just becomes
Mm.
like this feast and famine cycle where it's like constantly something's breaking. And I also love Alex says this too. He says if you're constantly fighting fires, there's a good chance you're the arsonist.
Yeah.
And I joke with people too. It was like if I had a monk on my podcast, he was in a monastery for 7 years in silence, and he summed up the meaning of life in a really, really easy question. He said, if you can't take a poop without your phone, you've never lived a day in your life. And I was like, there's so much profound wisdom in that. But,
Yeah.
we chase these external things, but when they're never enough and they never fill the bucket, we tend to have them and then we'll break them so that we have a place to put our energy and attention. And it really comes down to being fiercely protective and willing to be curious about your values. Like you
hmm
and I are very different men than we were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago,
Yeah.
which means my vision can change. And I tell people to be flexible on your opinions and solid on your values.
hmm
because your beliefs can change and your opinions can change and how you want to do business can change. But the thing that should never really change or you should never waver on is your values. And if you value those things, you have to protect them fiercely.
That's interesting because some people will actually say, well, wait a minute. Well, my beliefs are my values, right? But they are two very different things, aren't they?
Two very, very different things. I had to learn that lesson the hard way. I had to learn that lesson the hard way because I mean, I'm like, I would say I have embarrassment because I've been on like, 5 to 10,000 podcasts in my career. And I'm like, I don't think I could go listen to some of the podcasts that I did 8 years ago because my quote unquote beliefs that were my values are completely different now.
Hmm.
My beliefs are up to change. Like if I feel like this is important to me or this season's important to me, but my values are the things that like I'm gonna weigh my life on. Like, did I prioritize my family? Did I prioritize deep connections with friends? Did I make sure that I was always there to lend a hand or give somebody the shirt off my back? Like those are values that I will forever live and die by.
Hmm.
But even my beliefs are things that can change and like how I do it or how I execute it or the way in which I do it. And so it is a very drastic difference between values and beliefs.
Right. Now, one thing I know that's interesting too, and this kind of goes along, I think it's kind of bridging with our topic for today, right? With, especially with entrepreneurs and trying to get their own freedom too. I think this is kind of key. I mean,
Hmm.
definitely those values have to be in place first. And I don't know if you did this intentionally or not. Maybe if you did, it's brilliant. But I know where you live in Montana, although you're near an airport, it's not like you get easy direct flights.
Nope.
So almost like you have to prioritize what you do. You almost have to think about it. It's like, wait, do I want to hop two or three different planes to go do this speaking event? Was that intentional?
It was intentional
Yeah.
because I'm that guy that will like break down a concrete wall if I really want something. And so I use environmental design to my benefit. And it 1000% was intentional of me like having myself in a space where like one of the things I crave is nature and I
Yeah.
crave connection. Well, I'm surrounded by mountains and Glacier National Park. And I have clients who come out here. I have friends that come out here, but truthfully, the design worked really, really well because I went from flying 140 times a year thinking like I have to keynote in person, I have to go to this event to network, I have to do all these things to now in the last week I've given virtual keynotes in Denmark and in Australia twice. And I'm like, oh, but I didn't even think that that was a possibility
Hmm.
because I always just had easy access to get on a plane. And so environmental
Yeah.
design plays a big role in kind of creating an environment that holds me accountable to what I value instead of allowing all these like sneaky, leaky places for me to justify it and get really flexible on it.
Right. I think that's a disadvantage I have living in Utah where it's like a Delta hub, right?
Delta Hub, Salt Lake City.
Yeah. It's almost too easy sometimes to go to certain places.
Yeah, and it's been and there's moments like where there's been challenges where it's like, going to a client's wedding in Croatia. I'm like, do I really want to go to this? I'm like, this is 4 flights and 2 days of travel. And I was like, yeah, because I value our friendship. I value this deep thing. And, sometimes it feels like I put myself in suffrage, but at the same time, I fly home and I get here. I'm like, oh, so peaceful. Got it. Like this is why I do it. So yeah, it's been probably one of the biggest baked in benefits of like keeping me prioritized. And just like here, like I joke with people about Montana, it's like going back in humanity 50 years with 10-year ago technology.
Yeah.
Even the little things of like when I lived in Southern California, if something broke, I'd buy a new one on Amazon, have it delivered in an hour, and have my groceries delivered. And now I like go to
Right.
the grocery store every week. And then if something breaks, I actually fix it and I spend time in nature and I'm not distracted by all the noise and the things I could do, which holds me accountable to my values of like, I want to be able to close my eyes and know that like what I have is enough, that I have peace, that I have comfort, that I have solace, and my environment plays a big role in that.
Yeah. If you've been following this podcast, you're probably looking for great ways to create passive income right now, right? Well, we got you covered here with Central Lending. Central Lending specializes in alternative investments that actually are designed to create steady returns and long-term financial security for you and your family. Now, they prioritize transparency. They love, building those strong relationships, giving you that confidence and peace of mind, knowing that you have your money working harder for you, so you don't have to work so hard for that money. You want to learn more how to do that? Go to centrallending.com and check out what they've got today to create your passive income and wealth creation right now. Well, and one thing I've noticed in the last 5 years, right? We're kind of getting past the 5 year anniversary of when we started having all the shutdowns and everything.
Yep.
You know, and I've asked a lot of people this question, and they all kind of feel the same way. They all feel like, man, like 2020 felt like I had all the time in the world, and now I have no time at all. In fact, I feel like I have less, not just less time, but I have zero time left.
Hmm.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think COVID was a gift, and it was a gift for a lot of people to reprioritize. But then what happens is the world takes over again. And
Mhm.
then we become a victim to all the distractions and all the noise. And I think everybody got a taste of like what they truly craved and what they truly valued. But the
Yeah.
the difference is like who protected it and who still prioritizes it versus who fell back into the old patterns. And it restructured the whole way I do business. It restructured the
Mhm.
way I do coaching. It restructured the way I do client intensives, the way I do keynotes. And then I was like, oh, I'm not letting go of this. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of the times too, when we talk about freedom, I always joke with people. They're like, well, I want this, but I don't know when. And I'm like, who are you negotiating with? Like, you're in the driver's seat, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's this willingness to understand that, like, we have autonomy and agency over our life, over our business, over where we put our money, over where we put our energy and where we put our attention. And I think COVID was a gift because it kind of forced everybody into that bucket. And then when the world turns back on, it's like, well, are you going to become a byproduct of the world again, or are you going to dictate your own world?
Yeah. It almost felt like to me people were almost trying to make up for lost time, but they've never
Yep.
stopped making up for that
Yeah.
lost time.
Yeah. And I think it truly speaks to like time is one thing I value. Like
Yeah.
it's the one asset none of us can get back. And I think when we look at business, we look at entrepreneurship, right? Like even when we talk about like lifestyle and you helping people, have financial freedom and freedom in life and living a rich life, you get to a point in your life where it's like you can add as many commas as you want, but your life really isn't going to change. And if you build your life based on values, then you can do things with that money or with those resources as long as you protect and crave the right thing. And I think that that was like a big gift for me too in
Mhm.
COVID is because I went from, traveling in houses and cars and keynotes to boom to like I've been running the whole time, right?
Yeah.
Like I claimed I wanted this thing, except I had it at my fingertips and I wasn't utilizing it. And I think that that's really where the line of demarcation comes down to is like I've come to a point where I realize like you're as much as like I love you and who you are as a man and your business and your podcast and all of it, like you're not going to come create my freedom for me. You're
Mhm.
not going to come tell me how to manage my time. You're not going to come tell me what to prioritize. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, that agency is always with me. And I feel like COVID kind of sped some people up and made them wake up to like, holy moly, I keep claiming that I value these things, but I have access to them right now, and I'm still
Mhm.
not utilizing them.
Right.
Hmm.
Exactly. Well, that kind of leads to what we're talking about here, right? Which is like for those that are in business. I mean, I know everything we've talked about applies to everybody. I can already tell
Yep.
that anyone listening to this right now already can relate to this to some level. But for business owners, right? Like a lot of them that they claim they want that freedom. And you mentioned even you're running and running.
Yep.
Question is, were you running to or running from? That's another whole nother tangent probably. But I know a lot of people are running as well, and they've created their own rat race. Even though
Yep.
I know a lot of business owners go in to have that freedom and control of their destiny, they create their own rat race as well. How do
Mhm.
they escape that?
Yeah, I mean, the craziest part is the first step is acknowledging it and becoming aware of it, right?
Mhm.
Like that's the part that you can't live in cognitive dissonance, right? You
Mhm.
can't convince yourself or gaslight yourself that it's a different way than it really is. And the first step is truthfully realizing that a lot of us create these golden handcuffs and without intentionality, we'll tend to slap them back onto ourselves. And I think the first step is always awareness. Like if you want to change any habit, any behavior, any result, it's not instantaneously, but the first thing starts with like really knowing where you are. Like I joke with people is that everybody tells me they have this vision, which is like putting a destination to Google Maps. But then if you hit go and you don't have a current location, it says, where are you
Right.
starting from? And truthfully, it's like being aware of where you are and starting from. And so the awareness is the first step. And then the second step is starting to take intentional actions and behaviors that understand that there's a process to rebuild things, whether just like if, I used to be 100 pounds overweight. I couldn't get upset that the first day I went back to the gym, I didn't lose 100 pounds, right? Like it required consistency and protection and some discipline to follow that. But as long as I acknowledge where I am, and then I get some semblance of fuzzy clarity of what I would like it to look like in the future, then it's my job to build habits and behaviors to start bridging that gap and then really have the patience to push through them and bring it into integrity because there is no other way. And just like, I joke, I'm like, you can't get upset that you don't have abs and you don't go to the gym. And I used to joke with people that the fork didn't make me fat. I picked up the fork and put the food in my mouth.
Yeah.
So at some point, I have to acknowledge I'm the one that holds the fork. And if I don't like the meal that I'm eating, I also have the ability to change that recipe or change the meal that I'm eating. And it just requires consistency. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is they overvalue intensity and they undervalue consistency. And I think consistency is where this game is won. And so I think once you become aware of it, it's really, you're almost at the finish line of taking action towards that vision, but it requires that you become aware of it and you take that action. You can't delay it. You can't like, oh, I have this idea and 6 months later have the same idea. Like eventually, if you run a marathon, you can read as many books as you want, you can watch as many videos you want, and 12 months later you go run the marathon, you're going to die. But
Mhm.
instead of reading all the books, if you just put your shoes on and go for a 20-minute walk, and a 15-minute run and you do that consistently every day, you're going to get a whole lot further down the path. And it's the same in every bucket and every behavior that we live in.
It's almost as if you're saying it's almost better just to start simple, right?
Yes.
Just even if it's like a half step, not even the first step, it's like a half step in the right direction. That could
Yep.
be the thing that leads you to the next step and the next step and so on.
Yeah, 1,000%. Because what we try to paint is we try to paint this like beautiful vision. And I was like, but if you ever
Mm,
look at a painter, it took me years to realize that like what you see on the wall isn't the final product. There's
right.
thousands of layers of paint on underneath that. This on top of this on top of this. And
Mhm.
our goals or our vision or our alignment, or even with you helping people with income, it's these micro bites that we do consistently that create the capacity and then the confidence to keep going. And that's the way that the game is won.
And do you think like someone should just pick one area or should they pick
Yep.
multiple areas to do? Or what would
Yeah,
you say?
one. Yeah, and I
Just
love that
one.
you asked that. It's truthfully like you pick the one that allows you to get into action because the other ones will follow. But one of the mistakes that we make is we're like, oh, all this stuff is broken. And then we get frozen and we like toil around all the things that we could have. But every one of those is a missed opportunity to actually put something into practice that would bring us that result. And so what I try to tell people is like, start at the deepest level. And if we really, really think about it, it's the identity ones that make the biggest difference. Like if you're neglecting your health, if you're neglecting your sleep, if you're eating like crap, those ones are going to have a compound effect that like ripples out into everything else that you do
Yeah.
because they're really starting with the way that you see the world, the way that you see yourself, the way that you value yourself. And so it is always start. Just like, when I lost 100 pounds, it wasn't because I was like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym for an hour a day and change my whole diet. I actually
Mhm.
just started by walking for 15 minutes every morning when I woke up. And then eventually I went to like 30 minutes. And then once I felt better, I was like, God, I need to eat better and drink more water. I'm like, oh, I should start lifting again. And it starts to like spiral in a positive direction to get us those results.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody who's listening to this episode right now is saying, wait a minute, I'm listening to this because I was expecting to get like some kind of strategy or tactic or something about, marketing or, people, processes, something like that to buy me my time back. What would you say to them?
I, number one, I love you and thank you for being honest. Number two is you got the strategy and tactic because our perspective is the difference between our prison and our power, right? And if we look
Mhm.
at our life, you have the same ingredients, the same time as everybody else. Truthfully, it boils down to how you use it. And most of the time, the reason we misuse it is because we don't have the other perspective. And so, in order for anything to change in our life, we try to default to the how. But if all you do is execute the how, you end up right back where you are because you were missing the what and the why. And so, really, it's not about always having a strategy or tactic that somebody else gives you. It's about having the ability to come up with your own strategy and tactics to achieve what it is that you truly value. And it always starts with your clarity.
So are you saying that that really it's not AI that's going to save me?
Yeah, yeah, as much. The one thing about AI will buy your time back, but then you still have to be in that relationship with yourself. Because, like, my
Yeah.
running joke with people is that we spend most of our life avoiding the one relationship that we're guaranteed to spend the rest of it with, which is
Mm.
ourself, which
So
goes back to
true.
the monk comment. If you can't sit on the couch in silence for 30 minutes and just bask in gratitude of like what you have and where you are, it doesn't matter what workout you do, what strategy you implement, what tactic you try, because they're all just an avoidance of that relationship with self. And so AI, I think, is amazing because it's freeing up time to allow people to be in that relationship with themselves deeper.
Yeah. But we've done so many things to free up our time over the last several decades anyways, and look what we've done
Yep.
with it, right?
Yep.
Just
Yep.
created more busyness and more hassle. And kind of reminds me of The Road Less Stupid, Keith
I
Cunningham
love
wrote,
that book. That is such a good book. Thinking time.
yeah, you gotta have that thinking time. And it might be for some of you guys listening, it might just be you gotta, stop taking that phone to the bathroom, right? Or it might be you don't even take the phone, you don't even look at it till like 8 or 9 a.m. You get
Yep.
that time just to yourself.
1000%. And it really starts with those simple habits, right? Using the do not disturb on your phone. Like mine's on from 8 p.m. until 10 a.m. because, that next morning from 4:30 until 10 a.m. is my time. And it
Yeah,
starts by making these like micro habits and micro changes to really be able to value that relationship with yourself.
that's so true. I know my team's saying like, yeah, Chris, you need to do that too. Yeah. So no, this is awesome, man. Well, before I go to your final question here, if people want to follow you, I know you've got your podcast. I know you've written
Yep.
best-selling books. What's the best way people can follow and learn more about your stuff?
Yeah, I love it, man. Thank you for asking. If you want to see the pinkest website in the world, that's where the podcast is. It's mindofgeorge.com. And pink's my favorite color. You'll have to shoot me a DM and ask me why. Um, but I tell everybody my website is just loaded with free resources. My podcast talks about marketing, mindset, customer journey, and all those strategies and tactics everybody wants. And then if I can answer any questions for you, my Instagram's the best place. It comes directly to me. I'll answer any questions. I'll help any way I can. And my Instagram is it's George Bryant, but the it's is included. So you have to include the ITS.
Got it. Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to put that in the show notes too, so that we can make sure everybody follows you, especially if they're driving right now. We don't want them crashing,
Yeah.
just trying to,
Yeah. Yeah. No
you know,
crashing. No
trying to
crashing.
type in their Instagram handles. So, well, final question for you, George. We always ask people because this is the Money Ripples podcast. What do you feel is your ripple effect that you're here to create on this planet?
Mm, I love that question. I feel like my purpose on this planet is to have everybody feel the love of God and realize that no matter what story's been issued to you or what hand has been dealt in your life, whether it's trauma or divorce or bankruptcy or addiction or anything, that you still have the ability to live in your vision, live in your dream, and turn it into an impact. And so I feel like my mission is to give people a permission slip to love themselves at a very deep level and to use their life as the ability to spread their wisdom, to spread their magic, and to make a difference in this world. Because I feel like relationships are the number one thing that's missing in this world is like deeply connected ones. And I think all of us are welcome, all of us are whole and perfect. And I think the more we bring that into business, the better the world we live in is because I truly believe that entrepreneurs change the world. And so the more connected we all are, the better world that we can leave for our kids.
Amen to that. Man, you just described Money Ripples ripple effect right there, man. It's
I
perfect.
love it, my friend.
So, well, appreciate you again. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom that you shared with us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, brother, thanks for having me. For everybody listening, thank you for giving me the one gift I can't give back to you, which is time. So I appreciate it and hope it was helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, everybody, we appreciate your time as well. But remember, to make that time worth it, like Georgia just said, right? It's that first step. Be willing to take action, even just one thing, something towards the vision that you're trying to create. Even if it's a fuzzy vision, take that first step. Start, even if it's a half step, start taking that step towards your dreams and desires so that your life can begin to change right now. Remember, not just be a hearer of the word, but be a doer as well. Go and make it a wonderful and prosperous week. We'll see you later.